Hello and welcome back everyone. This is video number 2 in the series of we're trying to learn whether the democracy or the nation state that we had established in 47 was it exactly a sovereign nation state or not. Okay, this is something that is very serious, but it's not very much talked about in the public domain because it opens the floodgates. I cannot believe not a single politician has raised this issue, not a single even academic person, so on and so forth. We have been operating since 1947 as if we are a sovereign nation state. Okay, yes, the British they did leave. Okay, but are we really free? That is something that you must consider. If you have not already watched the first video, that first video will give you a good background about what we are about to discuss in this one and in the coming videos as well. Alright, so today we are going to focus on the act itself. That is, I can display it on your screen here. It's there on your screen. The Independence Act of 47. Okay, in the very first line you can see it was an act of UK Parliament. So if an act that was enacted in the Parliament of a foreign country, and not just enacted, even drafted, debated, discussed and passed by a foreign parliament, so that that itself gives us a clue about whether we really are sovereign or not, because clearly the act on which our nation was founded in 47, okay, that act was foreign. All right, so all of this, we all know this, conferred legislative sovereignty, meaning it was this act that gave the legislative powers to the constituent assemblies. Constituent assemblies were a group of people, and those people were not directly elected. That is also something that you must consider. People who drafted the constitution, they were not directly elected. Now there are certain people over here who will say that, oh no, they had the legitimacy to draft the constitution since they had been working with Congress for many years, since they had been a part of independence and the freedom struggle. So it confers upon them the authority or the mandate to draft the constitution on behalf of the people. That is absolutely and utterly wrong. Okay, the people who drafted the constitution, no matter how erudite or educated and whatever public standing they might have had at that time and they might have right now, but the simple fact that they did not have the public mandate tells us a lot about the foundation on which our nation state or the republic or our republic was founded. All right, so here they were simply just acting on the clauses that were given to them by the British as a legal mechanism for transfer of power based on Mountbatten Plan. Okay, simply that act, the Independence Act of 47, passed in the Westminster, was simply a mechanism through which there was transfer of power, meaning the position of authority in the state was earlier occupied by the British. Now in 47, since they were vacating that positions, and we can discuss at length about what were the reasons that made them vacate this power, so on and so forth, but the fact remains that they were vacating that place. And now since they were vacating, they needed somebody else at that place. Okay, so that was it. There was no independence, there was no struggle, there was no independence, there was no freedom, there was no revolution whatsoever. That was simply just changing of power. It's as if one prime minister is going out and making way for the next prime minister who has been chosen. Okay, in this case they were not even chosen by the people. So I know if you really sit and think about these things are very simple to understand. It's just very difficult to comprehend that why has nobody so far raised this issue. Here these were the additional clauses, emperor, these titles were. Now this is where it will all start making sense if it has not made sense to you so far. The fourth angle that I will be considering in this video is procedural and democratic lapses. Okay, meaning there are some procedures that must be followed in a democracy where if you are if you are aiming or aspiring to become a functioning or a well-functioning democracy, so there are certain procedures that help ensure that the mandate of the people is elicited and upheld at the same time. All right, so there are some democratic lapses that happened in 47. Let's see. Obviously, this is the first one. Sovereignty was imposed by foreign legislature. It is not that we gave birth to our own sovereignty. Like we adopted an act that made us into an independent republic. No, that was not it. Our sovereignty was imposed by the Parliament of the Westminster. Alright, this itself should tell you a lot. The first point itself says that Independence Act of 47 was passed exclusively and not by any legislative body in Bharat. So what does this tell you? So imagine if you are having difficulty to comprehend this fact or understand the gravity of the situation that I'm putting forth towards you, you must understand it like this. Let's say the White House in the United States passes a legislation and we adopt that legislation. So would you call Bharat a sovereign nation state if we adopt an act that was drafted without consultation with any of the natives, no political representation of the natives whatsoever, no voting power whatsoever, no consultation process, nothing. Everything was done inside four closed walls of Westminster, and it was foisted upon us. All right. Now we can agree that at that time we did not have the intellectual nor the military capability to fight back. Now that question is moot. If you look at the current intellectual capability that we have, or the military capabilities that we have, what is stopping us from establishing a true sovereign nation state? A state that is true to its definition of sovereignty. Alright, yes. Here it has no representation in the parliament. Okay, you're discussing a law about governing a country and you had no representation of the natives of that country. So is that really democratic? I'll leave it to your better judgment. Here, basic democratic principle that people should determine their own governance through their own representative institutions. There were no institutions, watching guard over the rights of the natives when this act was being debated, discussed, drafted and passed and assented by UK. Okay, neither central legislative assembly nor provincial legislature voted or debated or voted on the act. Not that it would make any difference, because people sitting in these legislatures and provincial assemblies, they were not directly elected, they were indirectly elected. So even if they would have voted in this passing of this act in the British Parliament, it would still mean nothing. The Constituent Assembly only gained full legislative sovereignty after 15th of August as a consequence of the act. Okay, so people like to say that no, we had a Constituent Assembly, so that makes us sovereign nation state. So from where, what is the source of power, or what is the from where does the genesis of this Constituent Assembly start? Okay, it was explicitly mentioned in the Act of 47, Independence Act of 47, that the upcoming dominions of Bharat and the daughter states of East and West Pakistan will have a Constituent Assembly. So obviously the establishment and functioning of the Constituent Assembly was based on the provisions and the clauses of the 1947 Act. All right. So everything that is there to know about Constituent Assembly, it necessarily finds its source in the Act. Flawed consultation process. The Mountbatten Plan emerged from negotiations with leaders but had serious limitation. The elite bargaining process and not a democratic deliberation. Okay, now there are a lot of people who will say that no, but the Independence Act was largely based on the Mountbatten Plan, and the Mountbatten Plan was hammered out by a series of negotiations with the natives. False. Okay, you cannot claim that the Congress and some other regional parties such as the Muslim League and all the others who were in the play at that time in the political game, they cannot be said to have represented the mass or the national opinion of the people. In fact, it was quite the contrary. They were simply a group of elites, a cabal that was vying for the position of power. It was simply a political game for them. So the Mountbatten Plan was hammered out by negotiations with these elites. Now these elites, they wanted to hold on to the power, or they were vying for a superior position in that power structure. Right? So their negotiations were clearly biased. They clearly had a conflict of interest. If you look at the third point, the final plan was negotiated between Viceroy and a small circle of political leaders, not through broad democratic consultation. Okay. Now there are a lot of people who will say, oh, at that time we did not have a lot of education, we did not have a lot of networks and connections with mass of the people. Agreed, at that time we were in a very bad position. But what is stopping us from doing that consultation process now? Okay, it is as if we have made a mistake in the past and we are still sticking by it, because the rationale that we use to justify our actions is that whatever happened in the past cannot be rectified now. Absolutely false. Okay, it's been what, like 7 decades since the British went out. We still have a lot of time for the future generations. Okay, and we are standing at a very crucial time in the juncture right now. Look at the world, what is happening in the world. People are having problems with their own identities. Look at what is happening with the states of Europe. Both the people of the book, they cannot coexist with each other. At the same time, they will preach to us about tolerance and secularism and whatnot. Okay, so world clearly is in an ego spiral, and the West wants to preach to the East, and the East is hell-bent on getting validation from the West. I don't know how we have reached this stage, but we need to come out of it. That is what I'm saying. And how do we come out of it? By establishing a true sovereign nation state. That is how we set, or we put Bharat on a path to development. There was no reference or plebiscite to ratify independence here. Reference or plebiscite is about to directly ask the people. Okay, conducting a plebiscite where you ask the residents or the inhabitants of the land, what exactly do you want. Now this has a more democratic element than what happened in 47. All right, they could have done that, but again this argument comes forward that we were very poor in infrastructure, the amount of literacy was not so well. Agreed. What is stopping us from doing it right now? That is the question that we must ask. Okay, whatever happened in 47 in those decades was something that destiny had forced upon us. We cannot undo that, but what we can do is rectify the mistakes. That is all that I'm asking. Partition implementation lacked democratic process. The Radcliffe Boundary Commission operated under extreme time pressure, drawing borders in just 5 weeks without any democratic input from affected populations. Okay, so they were going to divide these lands that were home to 5,000 years, 6,000 years of continued cultural existence. To this very day, you will see a lot of cultural practices in the parts of Northwest Frontier Province that currently has the name of Pakistan, or even Bangladesh for that matter. They have certain cultural practices that are part of the Aryanhood, or the Arya Dharma as we like to call it. Alright, but they won't accept it. They celebrate our festivals, they get married with our rituals, but they still, at the end of the day, they uphold their foreign identity that has been foisted upon them by the conversions that those people did, and they want to stick by it. Okay, so I have nothing to tell them. So the Redcliffe boundary, yes, they were all divided. Nobody was consulted. How do we exactly divide this? There were people, families, lines were drawn. There was a lot of killing at that time. If you don't really know what was the the aftermath of partition, a lot of literature has been written about this, and so you can simply do a Google search about it, and you'll find out what exactly happened during the partition, right? Princely states unilateral abandonment. We'll obviously cover this in the later part of the video. Here, this is something that a lot of people forget to focus on: electoral mandate issues. The members of the parliament who voted on the Independence Act were elected in the 1945 UK general election through first past the post system. They represented British constituents, not our population. Okay, so the members of the parliament, okay, the act of 1947, it was passed in the UK, that is in the Westminster. Okay, who voted for that act? people who were elected by the British people. They were elected in the 1945 UK general elections. Alright, they were the ones who voted for it. Nobody elected by us voted for that act. What does that tell you? Does it raise any questions inside your head? If it does, take these questions inside the classrooms, take these questions to the offices, to the cafes, to anywhere, any avenues of debate and discussion, and ask these things to people who claim to be intellectuals and knowledgeable, and all those people, ask them these questions and look at their answers. They'll tell you a lot about their political leanings. Here, we had no say in who represented them in the British Parliament in terms of legislation. So obviously we were not consulted. Constitutional authoritarianism from inception. The legal framework established contained inherent democratic constraints identified as blah blah blah. This is again not required, but yes. Okay. If you look at this part, the assessment says that the procedure that we followed was clearly undemocratic. The people who voted for that act, they were in the UK, so that clearly is again undemocratic. They cannot claim to speak on behalf of the mass of the people. Alright, so even if we say that none of the members of the Congress, they were part of the Constituent Assembly, but they themselves were not directly elected. They were indirectly selected, if you might use that word. Look up how provincial assembly elections were conducted, and what was the electorate of that election, who were the people who voted for it, voted in those elections. And you'll see, okay, it's all, a pack of cards. They are stacked one upon another to make a palace, but that at the end of the day, it is what it is, a palace made of cards, and those cards, they symbolize the lies that were told to us from 47 onwards. Okay, and we have managed to buy into those lies. I don't know how, but yes, the entire edifice, or the entire roots of a nation state that we had established in 47 is based on a lie, is based on an undemocratic process, is utterly and absolutely completely far away from the public mandate. Okay, so I urge you to take these topics to your history teachers, take these topics to people that you think have a good grasp over history, or know a little bit about history, and so on and so forth. All right, I'll come back again in the next video in this series, and we'll discuss the Mountbatten plan and what entailed. Thank you for watching.